is a complex topic that has been at the heart of Jewish and Christian theology for centuries. The doctrine known as the Trinity teaches that while God is one, he is a plurality within a unity. The triune God, eternally existent in three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. At the heart of this issue is the identity of the Messiah. Is Jesus divine, God come in the flesh, or is he simply a created being who was designated as the Son of God? Tonight, we debate this foundational doctrine. First, we have Sir Anthony Buzzard. He's a graduate of Oxford University and Bethany Theological Seminary. He holds master's degrees in theology and modern language. He served 24 years on the staff of Atlanta Bible College and serves as co-editor of a journal from the Radical Reformation.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for coming to this extraordinary occasion. My point of view is simple, based on 40 years of looking at the Bible and saying, what did Jesus believe about God? And I think it's quite simple. He recited the Shema of Israel, which says that God is one Lord, a single Lord. Had we not abandoned Jesus, I think we'd be doing fine, but Christianity is the only world religion that's abandoned Jesus at its creedal statement. I think that's a serious matter. So my point would be, study the Shema, read what Jesus said to the Jew when he asked about the Shema. He agreed with a Jewish expert, biblical expert, that the Lord our God is one Lord. Kyrios is, one single Lord. That should be the end of it. Then double that up with all of the thousands and thousands of singular pronouns, 62,000 singular pronouns in the Bible. I am God, nobody is beside me. It's me, no one else. Before me, no one. That's really very simple. So I don't think it's complex, but it's become complex over the years. Jesus is Yahweh, and you identify the Father as Yahweh, I leave you to count out how many Yahwehs there are there. You identify Jesus as Yahweh, and you identify the Father as Yahweh. I think that makes two Yahwehs. That's dangerous. If you then say all three together are Yahweh, you've got another use of Yahweh. So you've got Yahweh X is Jesus, another X, the Father is Yahweh, Holy Spirit is also Yahweh, that's another X. Those three X's make one X, because they're calling, my colleagues, my good colleagues here are calling all three together Yahweh. This word Yahweh is finding lots of reference, and I find that too difficult. Jesus said clearly, there's only one Lord, one Kyrios. He never claimed to be Yahweh. He claimed to be Yahweh's agent, and he claimed to be the Lord Messiah of Psalm 110:1, which governs the whole of our discussion, or should.
90 seconds to respond.
The mere creature. I hope you'll catch that word, mere. It begs the question all the time. If God ordains that his supreme, sinless Lamb can do all these things, so be it. He's not a mere creature. He's not just a man. He's a unique man. But back to the angel of the Lord. Stephen, you know, did not identify that angel of the Lord as the Son. He did not. He said an angel spoke to Moses. I would start with Stephen there. I would also go to Judges 16, where you'll find that the angel of the Lord is distinguished from Yahweh. If you want to offer a sacrifice to Yahweh, do it, said the angel of the Lord. He's not himself. The angel of the Lord is not Jesus, pre-existing, because you can't see God. So it makes no sense to say Jesus is God, but they saw him. Now let's say that again. You can't see God. Nobody's seen God and lived. So don't tell me then that the Son of God was there, he's God, and they saw him. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't think the writer of Hebrews was wrong when he said God spoke through a Son only in these last days, not before. Hebrews 1:2, very important text.
Response, 90 seconds.
Yes, back to a little history. We're throwing in some history here. Sir Isaac Newton would be pleased with what this side of the table is saying. John Milton, the three brightest brains of that century. Isaac Newton, and of course the famous hymn writer, Isaac Watts, who became a Unitarian towards the end of his life. The other one, John Locke. So it's not just a very small group of people who are not distinguished who believe this. But, you know, on the point of pre-existence here, I'm amazed that we don't go immediately to Matthew and Luke. You don't do calculus before you've done algebra, I gather, from your excellent book there. Let's start at the beginning and talk about the begetting of the Messiah. When was he begotten? Go to Matthew, go to Luke. Don't go to John. You do that later. Go to Matthew, go to Luke. And it's very clear that the Son of God was begotten. And that word beget, yanao in modern Greek, with the modern Greek pronunciation, yanao means to bring into existence, to give existence to. So a child reading that says, my goodness, Mary had a baby, a new Son of God came into existence. Nothing about that Son of God coming from outside the womb. That's very Gnostic and strange.
30 seconds more.
Oh, 30 seconds more. Wonderful. So Matthew and Luke are to precede in your studies, I suggest, ladies and gentlemen. Precede John. This argument is going to be from John almost entirely, and isolated verses from John. Why not go to the beginning and the end of John? John wrote the whole book to prove he's the Son of God, the Messiah, and he introduces the Son as the King of Israel at the beginning. But Matthew and Luke were written to offset the ideas that my good friends here are giving us, that there was a pre-existing Son who entered the womb of Mary. Very strange.
Next question, addressed to our non-Trinitarian panel from our Trinitarians. Jesus explicitly refers to his pre-existence in numerous passages in the New Testament, stating that he came from God and was returning to God, that he came down from heaven and would return to heaven, that he enjoyed glory together with God his Father before the world began. On what scriptural grounds do you deny his pre-existence? 2 minutes.
Great question. If you're reading the NIV, you're being misled. Let me say that slowly. If you're reading the NIV, you're being misled. No text says that Jesus returned to God. Does it? Do you know the difference between ipostrepho, to return, and porevome, to go? Check it out carefully. No text, except in the NIV, which is misleading, that says that Jesus returned to God, point one. John the Baptist was sent from God. John the Baptist was sent from God. Jesus said in John 7:51, my flesh came down from heaven. I want you to think about that very carefully. My flesh came down from heaven. And think about what sort of language we're using. Is this literal or metaphorical? Go carefully with John. Do your homework first in Matthew and Luke. And put your stake in Matthew and Luke first.
Next question, addressed to our non-Trinitarians from our Trinitarians. On several occasions in the New Testament, both in the Gospels and in the Epistles, Jesus is explicitly called God. How do you explain these verses, the grammatical meaning of most of which is quite straightforward? 2 minutes.
Okay, I would argue that Jesus is called God once for sure. In the Psalm 45 quoted in Hebrews 1:8, thy throne, O God. Immediately there's a God on top of him, by the way. And his God has given him that throne. I'll grant that one. Scholars will argue till the cows come home. We don't want to bore you with grammatical and syntactical issues in the other verses that claim that Jesus is called God. I don't think they're valid at all. Many Trinitarians I could cite you do not think he's called God in the other 7 or 8 texts. So that's a matter of grammatical debate, and it's rather tedious. He's not called God. The Father's called God 1,300 times. Those are Unitarian statements, every one of them. And I find that rather simple.
Response? 90 seconds.
Yes, there are lots of Yahweh texts in the Old Testament that apply to Jesus. He's his shaliach, his agent. Everything that Yahweh does in the Old, Jesus can do in the New. It doesn't make him Yahweh. There's only one Yahweh. We keep talking about 2 Yahwehs. Very difficult. Only one Yahweh. That's the Father. Jesus does all this Yahweh stuff, the God stuff in the New Testament, searches the hearts and the minds. Of course, as shaliach, he's empowered to do it. That's wonderful. So I don't accept any of these arguments that this makes him literally Yahweh. He's representing Yahweh. If Joe sends me out on a job, I am Joe in Hebrew thinking. Not Joe, but Joe.